From translation, ISV International Standard Version. This 13th day of the year. Today we are reading passages Genesis 38 to 40. Genesis chapter 38, verses 1 to 32. About that time, Judah left his brothers and went down to stay with a man of Adullam named Hurrah. There Judah saw the daughter of a Canaanite man whose name was Shua. He married her and had sexual relations with her. She conceived and gave birth to a son, and he named him She conceived again and gave birth to a son, and she named him Onan. She gave birth to still another son and named him Shelah. Judah was in Kezib when she gave birth to him. Judah got a wife named Tamar for his firstborn But Judah's firstborn, was evil in the Lord's sight, so the Lord put him to death. Then Judah said to Onan, "Go and have sexual relations with your brother's wife according to the custom of a brother-in-law, and provide offspring for your brother." But Onan knew that the offspring wouldn't be his, so whenever he had sexual relations with his brother's wife, he wasted his semen on the ground so that he wouldn't provide offspring for his brother. What he did was evil in the Lord's sight, so the Lord put him to death too. Then Judah said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, "Live as a widow in your father's home until my son Shelah grows up." For he thought he might die too, like his brothers. So Tamar went to live in her father's home. After a considerable time had passed, Judah's wife, the daughter of Shua, died. When Judah had recovered his grief, he went up to Timnah to his sheep shearers, he and his friend Hurrah the Adullamite. When Tamar was told, "Your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep," she took off her widow's clothes, covered herself with a veil, wrapped herself up, and sat down at the entrance to Enaim, which is on the road to Timnah. For she saw that Shelah had grown up, but she hadn't been given to him as a wife. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute because she had covered her face. So he turned aside to her by the roadside and said, "Come, let me have sexual relations with you," because he didn't realize that she was his daughter-in-law. She asked, "What will you give me to have sexual relations with you?" He replied, "I will send you a young goat from the flock." She asked, "What will you give me as a pledge until you send it?" He said, "What pledge should I give you?" She replied, "Your signet ring, your cord, and the staff that's in your hand." So he gave them to her and had sexual relations with her. Then she got up and left. She put on her widow's clothes again and returned to her usual appearance. Judah sent the young goat by his friend the Adullamite to get back the pledge from the woman, but he couldn't find her. So he asked the men of the place where she had been, "Where is the prostitute who was sitting by the road at Enaim?" They said, "There's never been a prostitute here." So he went back to Judah and said, "I couldn't find her." The men of the place also said, "There's never been a prostitute here." Then Judah said, "Let her keep it, so that we don't become a laughingstock. I did send her this young goat, but you couldn't find her." About 3 months later, Judah was told, "Your daughter-in-law Tamar has played the prostitute, and now she's pregnant because of her immorality." Judah said, "Bring her out, and let her be burned to death." While she was being brought out, she sent word to her father-in-law, "I am pregnant by the man to whom these belong." Then she said, "Please identify whose these are, the signet, the cord, and the staff." Judah recognized them and said, "She is more righteous than I am, because I didn't give her to my son Shelah." And he didn't have sexual relations with her again. When the time came for her to give birth, there were twins in her womb. While she was in labor, one of them put out his hand. The midwife took a scarlet thread and tied it on his hand, saying, "This one came out first." But then he drew back his hand, and his brother came out. So she said, "What a breach you've made for yourself." So he was named Perez. Afterward his brother, who had the scarlet thread on his hand, came out. He was named Zerah. Genesis chapter 39, verses 1 to 23. Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an Egyptian official, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man. He was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made everything he did successful. So Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar appointed him as overseer over his household, and put everything in his charge. From the time that Potiphar appointed him as overseer in his house, and over everything in his charge, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house because of Joseph. The Lord's blessing was on everything he owned, in his house and in his fields. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care. With Joseph there, he paid no attention to anything in his house except the food he ate. After a time his master's wife looked with desire at Joseph. She said, "Sleep with me," but he refused. He said to his master's wife, "Look, my master doesn't concern himself with anything in his house, and he has put everything in my care. He has no greater concern in this house than me, and he has not withheld anything from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do this great evil and sin against God?" Although she spoke to Joseph day after day, he didn't listen to her to lie beside her or be with her. One day he went into the house to do his work, while none of the men of the household was there inside. She caught him by his garment and said, "Sleep with me." But he left his garment in her hand and fled outside. When she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and had fled outside, she called out to the men of her household and said to them, "Look, he has brought us a Hebrew to make fun of us. He came into me to sleep with me, but I called out with a loud voice. When he heard me raise my voice and cry out, he left his garment beside me and fled outside." She kept his garment beside her until his master came home. Then she told him the same story, saying, "The Hebrew slave you brought to us came in to make fun of me, but as soon as I raised my voice and cried out, he left his garment beside me and fled outside." When his master heard his wife's words about what Joseph had done to her, he became furious. So Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, so he was there in prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and extended kindness to him. He gave him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. The warden put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever they did there, he was in charge of it. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with him. Whatever he did, the Lord made it successful. Genesis chapter 40, verses 1 to 23. Later, when the cupbearer and the baker for the king of Egypt offended their lord, the king of Egypt, Pharaoh became angry with his two officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard appointed Joseph to be their attendant, and he attended them. They stayed in prison for some time. One night, both the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt had dreams, each with its own meaning, to be interpreted by Joseph. When Joseph came to them in the morning, he observed them, and they were dejected. So he asked Pharaoh's officials who were with him in his master's house, "Why do you look so dejected today?" They told him, "We both had dreams, but there's no one to interpret them." Joseph said to them, "Don't interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." So the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream. "In my dream," he said to Joseph, "there was a grapevine right in front of me. On the vine were 3 branches. As soon as it budded, it blossomed, and its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. This is what it means," Joseph said to him. "The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position, and you will place Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you used to do when you were his cupbearer. When things go well with you, please remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this house. For I was indeed stolen from the land of the Hebrews, and here too I have done nothing for which they should put me in the prison." When the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he said to Joseph, "I also had a dream. In it there were 3 baskets of white bread on my head. In the top basket were all sorts of baked food for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating it out of the basket on my head." "This is what it means," Joseph replied. "The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head from you and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh off you." Now on the 3rd day, it was Pharaoh's birthday, so he gave a banquet for all his servants. He lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker among his servants. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position as cupbearer again, and he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand, but he hanged the chief baker, just as Joseph had interpreted to them. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot about him,